Still Loading Podcast is brought to you by the wonderful people on Patreon. Amazing people like Eric H., Mr. Biscuits, Stephen P., Gilmer, and Kevin from the Bit by Bit Foundation have been wonderful enough to support the show over there on Patreon. So if you would also like to get your name read at the beginning of an episode, along with a bunch of other goodies, go over to patreon.com/stillloadingpod and check out everything it has to offer. On this episode of Still Loading, I knew police budgets were high, but I didn't know they had enough to go into other dimensions. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of the Still Loading Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Koval, and today's episode is a patron-voted one. That is right. My wonderful patrons voted on which game I should play. I put a bunch of Switch games up. I forget what they all were. I'm not going to list them now, but the winner of those four that I put up is the game we are talking about today, Astral Chain. And I'll do a brief plug. If you would also like to help vote for future game topics, patreon.com/stillloadingpod. Any level over there will get you access to patron voting rights. So yeah, I'll do a more detailed shout out at the end, but we are not here to talk about my patron shout outs. We are here to talk about the game Astral Chain, developed by Platinum Games, published by Nintendo back in 2019 on August 30th, 2019. And joining me to discuss this game of all things asses and trolls and chains is my friend Adam from The Good, the Bad, and the Backlog. Adam, how are you doing today?
Good, thank you. Now put your hands up, turn around, and you have the right to remain silent or continue talking unless your name is Miranda, in which case you're exempt from all future laws. I think that's how it goes.
Man, I don't know what kind of Miranda rights are in this fictional version of Earth, but I'd hate to see how long it is when you're dealing with like beings from different planes of existence.
I'm more curious about how those beings from different dimensions will conduct a cavity search on me.
Well, it's with the chain, Astral Chain. You know, you can just kind of feed it up there and swish it around. That's gross.
That's a whole genre of porn that you don't want to visit right now. Please don't Google that, people.
Oh my God, Astral Chain porn would be crazy.
I'm pretty sure. Actually, I doubt that.
I'm not going to look for it.
Yeah,
I'm sure it's on the internet. It probably exists somewhere.
There'll be
I don't want to find
art
it.
page somewhere, but you know,
yeah,
no live action stuff as of yet. Until my next feature film comes out, in which case you can catch it on my OnlyFans. Astral Chain, cavity
only
search
chains
of doom. I don't know. Fuck, I'm terrible. Anyway, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited to make my debut and never be asked back again.
Well, I mean, for a little behind the scenes, listeners can expect Adam to appear on a future episode of the show in probably a few months. I don't know. Wait, this is coming out in July. It's coming out, in another month or so. You'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, Adam, thank you for joining me. Pleasure to have you on the show. So as we are wont to do, as I steal a phrase from our buddies over at Retro Hangover, we always talk about our personal histories with it, how we kind of first discovered the game. So I want to throw it over to you as the guest. How did you first kind of get introduced to Astral Chain? And actually, when I put the word out to our podcasting pals saying, hey, I'm looking for a guest to talk about Astral Chain, who would be interested, you said, it's on my backlog, I'll play it. No pun intended for your podcast title, but it was on your backlog, so you offered to join, so here you are. So what made you kind of jump on that and want to talk about this game?
Okay, so buckle in, people. This might be a long one.
Buckle up your sit downs.
Yeah. If you're in the car, you have to put on we call it a seatbelt. Apparently you guys call it safety belts. But anyway, buckle up.
We call it a seatbelt. I call it a seatbelt.
I've seen some people call them safety belts. I'm like, what the hell? That's crazy.
I mean, I've always referred to it as a seatbelt. I mean, I understand it does keep you safe, but I always call it a seatbelt. Sorry,
Maybe it's a
go on.
maybe it's a regional thing, and it's like maybe people in the South call it a safety belt. I don't know. Anyway, I digress. So I've been a big fan of Platinum Games for a very long time. Astral Chain is developed by Platinum Games, and I used to love Bayonetta. I was an absolute whiz at that game. I was very, very good at it. I probably suck now, but back in the day when that came out, I was like getting platinum trophies on all the levels, all the fights. I 100%ed it, got all the achievements, loved it. So when I found out that they had announced Astral Chain, I was like, hell yeah, I'm getting that. So I picked it up at release. Absolutely love the art style and stuff. We'll get to it when we get to it. But around the time this game came out, which was, I believe, 2019, I got it on release, and I was actually at that point going through the process of applying to work for the police force. So I
Hmm.
thought, wow, a game about anime police officers. This is perfect for me. I can sort of live out my little fantasy before I join the police force. And played a few hours of it initially, liked it. But I think at this point in time, I had I think it was like a psych evaluation through the police application thing, and COVID had just hit. It had been not great for a lot of people. So,
Yeah.
safe to say, I completely flopped that psych evaluation because I was not in a good place. And to be honest,
Hmm.
looking back on it, I'm not fit to be a police officer anyway. So, they made the right decision. I'd be arrested. No, actually, I wouldn't be arrested. I'd be kicked out in a very short period of time for probably saying something offensive or making an inappropriate joke at an inappropriate time, whatever. Um, anyway, once I failed and I basically washed out of the application process, I did not come back to this game because it was just too much of a sore spot to like
Mm.
be like, oh, well, I've just failed at becoming a police officer, so I don't really want to play anything police related, even though, it looked like a great game and I love Platinum. So once you sort of floated it out there that you wanted to play it, I was like, oh, it's been 4 or 5 years ish since that happened. So why not? Let's pick it back up. I've been meaning to pick it back up for ages. So I just was happy to jump on, start from the beginning, start fresh, and play through it without the dark cloud of failure hanging over my head. It's not as fresh anymore.
That is a wild like journey to get to this game. I had no
Yeah.
idea you were gonna or trying to be a police officer back then. I don't blame you. I would have failed the psych eval too,
Oh,
guaranteed.
I'll
Anxiety is a bitch, man. Never, no, I don't think I could handle it.
let me tell you,
Um,
I have very vague memories of what I actually said in that psych like interview thing, but I don't know how I got to it, but I said something along the lines of like, I know I'm really good looking and that's fine. Like I was talking about how good looking I was, and I don't remember how I got onto that. Um, yeah, it was an absolute mess.
I can imagine like if you did get in, it's just some dude behind like the two-way glass going like, "We need good-looking dudes on the force, Sarge. Let's hire him. Come on."
It's like, yeah, I know I'm a really good looking person and blah, 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 but I don't know what that had to do in relation with any question that they asked. And I could almost like, thinking back, I don't know if it was my imagination, but I remember seeing them like look at each other and I'm like, oh no, I've lost it.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
I mean,
So anyway,
I can understand that type of pain where you look back on something and but like cringy moments in your own life live rent free in your head and be like, I can't believe I did that or said that.
yes,
But
it always comes to you just before you're going to sleep or while you're having
uh-huh.
a shower.
Yeah, yeah, that pretty much, and then it keeps you up for a little while. But
Yeah.
um, for myself with Astral Chain, I remember when this game came out, it was talked about a lot online. Like people were talking about this really killer app for the Switch, and it was like this was only released on the Switch. I think yeah, it still is a Switch exclusive game because Nintendo published it.
Yep.
Um, and I remember just hearing it was really popular. A lot of people liked it. It was a good action game that people were really impressed with. I remember watching a few streamers like play it, but I don't think I really paid attention, so I didn't really know much about it. I tried playing it, I want to say back in 2022, and never even completed the first mission because I found it sometimes it's hard for me to just play a game with just for enjoyment because I get distracted by other things easily. And I don't
Yeah.
know if it's because I'm on my phone too often or if it's just a product of being a content creator now. Your mind is like stretched 1,000 different ways. I don't know. Either way, I didn't get very far. And then I knew I wanted to play it at some point, so I put it up for the patron poll, and it won. And a little teaser for later on. I'm happy it did. I actually kind of enjoyed my time with this, but we'll get into all that as we kind of talk through the game. So I want to start off though, Adam, with just kind of like a basic overview of what this game is. It's an action game where you play as an unnamed police officer. Though well, you name them, you can name them whenever you want. What did you name your character by any chance, or
Um,
if you don't mind?
I think I just. Oh wait, hang on. I'm having flashbacks. So the first time I played it, I think I called him Blaze, like
Okay,
a fire blaze. I don't
Laser
know why.
Blazer.
Because I think I changed their color to the hair color to a sort of a reddish thing. Because I'm like a quarter ginger, so sometimes I
Hmm.
lean towards the redheads when I'm creating custom characters and stuff. I don't go out and try and hunt redheads or anything. But
Not yet, at least. Not with that attitude, you won't.
yeah, who wants a redhead anyway? Yuck. Um, and so what I mean by quarter redhead is I have a sort of red beard and red pubes, but my hair on my head is brown. So just to give you that mental image. What was the question? Oh,
What did
what
you
did I
name
call
your character?
it? And the second time around, I just called it Adam because that's my name.
Okay. I named my character Karas because I'm a big fan of the anime. That's generally my go-to for naming characters.
Yeah.
Um, so mine was Karas. And what type of like, because you can customize how your character looks in this as well. I gave my character kind of like a some purplish hair with how did I? It's almost like it was semi long, and how can I describe it? It was like all parted to one side, kind of emo-ish, but it didn't cover his eyes.
Okay.
But it was all kind of parted to one side. It was kind of like a pink purplish hair color. I don't know why I went with that. I just thought it looked kind of cool.
How do you?
How did you make your character look to? Did you make your character to look like you, or did you pick something a little bit different?
Um, I wasn't feeling that flamboyant, so I kept it pretty standard. I think initially I gave it like platinum blonde hair, and then something that really annoyed me was that because it's two twin characters, so you pick either
Hmm.
the male or the female, and whichever one you don't pick is going to be voice acted in the story and stuff. But the thing I didn't like is that you couldn't customize what the twin looked like. So
Yeah.
I made my character initially look quite different from the default with blonde hair and just short hair because I'm not, you know, wild and crazy with my designs or anything. Um, and it bugged me that the character that I was playing had a different hair color from the sister. So I was like, "Fuck! If I could just." Oh, sorry. Am I allowed to swear?
Yeah, yeah, you can swear.
Okay,
You can
cool.
swear.
I was like, "Darn it!
Yeah, you can
Darn
swear.
it!
Darn it. Oh, sorry, continue.
Darn it! This girl and this guy who are supposed to be twins now don't look like they're twins anymore. So that kind of bugged me. And then I just sort of defaulted back to the default hair color, and then gave him like a slicked back, semi long thing, kind of like a I don't know if a guy who goes wakeboarding on the weekends had an office job and needed
Oh,
to
I see,
slick
I
back their
see.
long hair. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
uh
yeah.
so I before we get like what I want to do to set up the gameplay and everything for those who don't know about like what this game is about, actually going to read off the setting section of the Wikipedia page because I think it does a really succinct job of describing what the world is. So like this game takes place in like a post-apocalyptic world. Like I'm just going to read it right off from here. So on Wikipedia, this is how they describe the setting. Astral Chain is set in the year 2078, where humanity is on the brink of extinction. The remnants of the human populace have retreated to a megacity called the Ark, which rests on a massive artificial island. The world is under attack by interdimensional lifeforms called chimeras, which reside in the astral plane, which is a vast parallel dimension composed of crystallized data that is uninhabitable to humans. The chimeras cause destruction and drag civilians into the astral plane via wormholes. And they all, when they're over here, they also, or when they're in the human side of the world, yeah, when they're in the humans dimension, they spread red matter, which corrupts living things and humans. And to combat them, this is where your character comes in. Whichever, whether you play as the girl or the boy twin, you are part of this task force called Neuron, which I think is a dumb name. I'm just gonna say it. It's too close to moron, and so when like every time I see it, I'm like, it just I don't know. It doesn't work for me. I it's one of those words where it's like this would sound really cool in sci-fi, and neuron is part of your brain, but it's too close to moron or something. I don't know. It just doesn't work for me.
I
Um,
had no problem with it.
I it's not like it was awful, but it was weird to me. Anyway, you gain the ability to use these things called legions, which are subservient chimeras that humanity has been able to capture and not tame, but kind of hold on to a leash, and they're tethered to you via this psychic chain, hence the astral chain, the name of the game. And then the events of the story unfold, which we will get into, but that is the setup for this world. um I actually think it might be smart to talk a little about the story. We'll save the story to the end, but Adam, I want to throw it over to you.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on the setting of this game? Did you like this setup for the plot? Did you think it was interesting, or did it kind of glaze over you?
No, I was pretty interested in it. I do think the game doesn't do a very good job of explaining the setting because it took me a long time to realize that their location on the Ark is actually like a floating city somewhere, and the rest of the world is ruined. Unless they explained it like very close to the beginning, and I just forgot about it. But it seemed like they may have brought it up once and then not mentioned much about it again after that.
That's
So
that's pretty much it.
yeah, like because I was kind of more interested in the visual design, and I was getting absorbed into this whole sort of neon Blade Runner esque setting, and that was really appealing to me. So it didn't really matter too much about what the plot setup was, other than I'm a new police recruit, haha, triggering, and and I'm in a sci-fi cyberpunk kind of setting. And I was like, sweet, futuristic police officer, let's go. And then, I love the whole like interdimensional monster thing as well. Very anime, very cool. So I was sucked into the setting, but it was more to do with how the game looked rather than the explanation of where the game was taking place.
I can understand that. I think the visuals are great in this game. We'll talk a bit more about them in a moment. You know what? Fuck it. We'll go into it right after this. I love the visuals of this. We'll go into that right in just a moment.
Okay.
Um, but I'm with you that I like this. I like this setting. I like the whole uh setup for this game. I think you're right, it is a little hard to remember because they bring up the whole idea of the Ark being this artificial island that humanity has retreated to right after the kind of opening mission, the cinematic opening mission, and then they don't really talk about it again. Like you kind of forget that this mega city that you're tasked with defending is on this island, because you can't tell. Like all you ever see is city. So for all you
Yes.
know, you might as well just be in like Tokyo, or you might as well just be in New York, or San Francisco. Like it could name a city. You could pick any city, and you might as well just be there, like a futuristic version of whichever city you want.
Yeah.
Um,
That's a good
so
point because I think that this game really would have benefited from having some sort of visual representation of what the rest of the world looks like. Like, show us the floating island from the outside and how it's floating
yeah,
above this whole corrupted world or something. And then it gives you this perspective of, okay, I'm just this one person in this floating city and the rest of the world is screwed. So that would have, like a what in films and stuff. An
An
establishing shot.
establish yeah, an
Yeah.
establishing shot. Even if you were like, it could just be like in some of the sections of the game where you're walking around on the streets, if you could just be like by water and all you can see from the water is just a vast ocean, just something to remind you that you're on this island that is just in the middle of nowhere that humanity has retreated to because the chimeras has pretty much corrupted the rest of the world.
Is it a
Um,
floating island? Is it in the sky? Or am I misremembering that?
it's artificial. I'm assuming it's just some random island in the middle of like the Pacific. Who knows? Maybe they turned that giant ass fucking plastic plastic debris pile in the middle of the Pacific Ocean that's larger than the size of Texas. Fuck it, God, makes me sad about the environment. Maybe they just converted that into the island. Who knows?
Let me see.
That
Let me
would make
see.
that would make the most sense. But they just listed as artificial island. So as far as I know, it's just in the middle of the water. I don't think it's
Okay.
like
Yeah,
up in the
you're
sky or anything.
you're right. I'm looking at a picture of it, and I believe it actually is in the water. So yeah, you
Well, there
win,
we
I
go.
lose this round.
Well, I am the host, so you know. But no, yeah, so that's the setup to the game. Now I want let's move into the visuals and like overall kind of like music and aesthetic of this. Normally I save that to the end, but I'm going to be honest, man. I think this game is beautiful. I
Oh yeah.
really like the visuals of this. What are your thoughts though before I go any further into my thoughts?
I think the visuals are probably the most striking thing about this game. It's the first impression, and it is very, very unique. I've never seen a cyberpunk anime-esque game with these kind of visuals before. I'm sure they're probably out there. There's someone in the comments being like, "Oh, it's actually in this game." But anyway, it's
Ghost in the Shell,
yeah.
maybe.
But like even then, like this one has a very distinct art style and the uses of like purples and blues and neons and reds and stuff. It's a very distinct style that I think works really, really well. And that's kind of like what drew me into it initially, because it's got its own sense of style. And
Hmm.
I will admit that sort of halfway through the game, or even earlier than that, I was kind of wishing that this was like on the Xbox Series X or the PS5 or something, just so I could get that extra sharpness and clarity. Because I think sometimes it does tend to look a little blurry with so much going on. But considering that it's on the Switch, it looks very, very impressive. And it's definitely style over high fidelity graphics anyway. So, yeah.
Yeah, and the reason it has such a distinct style, they made the characters or the character designs for the game were done by manga artist Masakazu Katsura. uh yeah, okay, I just want to make sure I said it right. I don't know much of his work at all, but let's look at his Wikipedia, see if like what he's known for. He's done a manga called Wingman. He's done a bunch of ones that I've never even heard of before. DNA Squared, Shadow
Mm.
Lady. There's a whole bunch that I like. I'm not well versed in his work. I'm not well versed in manga in general, so I wouldn't say I'm like an expert on it. But uh, they got a manga artist to do a lot of the art direction for this game, and or the character designs, and that's not unheard of. Obviously, where this episode's coming out shortly after Toriyama month. Akira Toriyama did that for the Dragon Quest games and Chrono Trigger and stuff like
Hmm.
that. So it's no surprise that this game has such a clear, distinct visual style when they got a manga artist to kind of help influence that. And the designs in general of this game are just really cool. I think the police uniforms are really fun. I like how they look. The Legion designs, the tamed chimeras, well, not tamed, but we'll get into that later. But the chimeras that you can control, I love how they look. I think those are so cool, and they all are so varied. And he did a great job of like changing the way they look depending on which type of weapons they use. So it's not just like it's the same one with different weapon types progress through the game. We'll get into what all that means later on, but like it's very cool. And there's a lot of like neon type of colors. Like it's very, very stylized, like you said. uh I took so many screenshots on my Switch, and especially when you go into the astral plane, I thought that place was awesome looking.
Oh yeah. I love the environmental designs in general, like especially this sort of warped astral plane thing. And even when those aspects are brought into the real dimension or whatever through like the corruption that you have to clean up and stuff, it just looks really, really good. Like even the city designs, they're pretty good. But then all of a sudden, like there are these like jutting up pillars of corrupted red mass and stuff. And you're like, oh, that's so cool. Like it just looks really, really good. I love it. I love the way it looks.
It looks fantastic, and it's consistent throughout. I was really blown away by it, and I'm not one who normally like. One of the reasons I have a hard time talking about visuals is that if there's not something that sticks out to me, which is most of the time, my critique of it is just like, oh, it looks good, like it's fine.
Yeah.
But in this,
It's
I
like,
think.
how do you
Oh, sorry, go
describe how something looks on an audio podcast? I
on
always
audio
struggle with that.
medium.
Yeah.
Well, it's
But
the same with the music too. I have a hard time with that. But the
oh,
music for
yeah.
this game, I really liked as well. They had a really cool mashup of like orchestral with there's some like metal thrown in there.
Yep.
Um and also pop music. Like when there's a moment in the game when you get a power, which I know I keep alluding to all the gameplay stuff. I want to keep the gameplay in the gameplay section. There's a moment where you get a new power and a pop song comes on when you turn it on, like a J rock or something like that, like a J rock song, and it's really fun to like play with that. But the when there's not like full on lyrics and vocals, there's like, how can I describe? You ever heard of like gent metal, the genre of gent, like DJENT?
Hmm. Nope. Must be a cool kid thing.
I mean, I'll see if I can find an example of it. It's it's imagine like gent metal from the best way I can describe it, from the way I understand it. So any music fans out there, if I'm wrong with this, feel free to correct me. It's almost like it's a type of metalcore with like lots of breakdowns, but the reason it's called gent is because of the types of sounds that are used by the guitars. It almost has like a gent, gent, like that kind of a sound effect, if that makes sense.
Not
It's
really, but
it's
yeah.
I'll see if I can find like the name of it is almost an onomatopoeia for the sound effect, like the sound of the guitars, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I like there's actually quite a lot of electronic music in it as well. Like it's almost like a mixture of rock, electronic, and a little bit of pop. But
Hmm.
uh, I actually used to work out to this soundtrack before I had fully completed the game.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah, I'll do like my little cardio workouts in the lounge room with the Astral Chain soundtrack playing in the background, and then it would switch over to Persona 5. But yeah, it was I liked the music quite a lot. So I would do that for weeks at a time. And then eventually it just sort of fell off my playlist. But yeah, I think it's a really good track, and it's got a lot of like high energy pumping music that you can use to do some push ups or some sit ups or train for the police force.
The soundtrack, it's awesome. Like I think it is married really well to the overall visuals and aesthetic of the game. The story definitely helps too. Like this game, both in terms of visuals and music and in tone, is very very anime, and I mean that as a
Yes.
compliment. I like, so if you don't like anime, this might not be up your alley. Like I think the gameplay is great regardless, but like the overall aesthetic and vibe is just straight up anime. I mean, on the Wikipedia, for Christ's sakes, it draws heavy inspiration from various cyberpunk manga and anime. Like, excuse me, that's what it is. I don't know, I don't have much more to add to it. I love how this game looks. I think it's underratedly one of the better looking games on the Switch.
Oh, absolutely. I will say though that not all of the tracks were a smash hit for me.
Oh
There
no.
was one in particular that I really didn't like after a
Wh-
while.
which one is that?
It's the song that plays when you're in the police headquarters in between missions.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that
It gets a little old after a while.
yeah, I think it's like a little too subdued maybe. I don't know. It's like this weird sort of trip hoppy thing with a vocal track to it that has no lyrics. It's just this woman going, Like, fuck off, shut up. Like,
Know what it
just stop.
reminds me of? It
What?
reminds me
Elevator music.
of sort of. It reminds me of like any game that is done by, oh my gosh, why am I blanking on this dude's name? Oh fuck. The dude who does Kingdom Hearts.
Oh, Tetsuya Nomura?
Thank you. Like this music reminds me of like if Tetsuya Nomura makes a game and there's some type of office setting that you keep returning back to, he will use this track in every single game.
I hate that guy.
Don't tell Eric. We love you, Eric.
Oh, I'll tell him. I
Uh,
can't stand Tetsuya Nomura.
it's funny. I I don't hate it, but I can understand how it would get under your skin. It's not like anything great. I
Yeah,
can hear it in my head now that you bring it up, so thank you for that.
you're
Um,
welcome.
it reminded me specifically. The reason I brought up Tetsuya Nomura is because I played the first patron poll for this year was the for the January episode was Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII for the PSP,
Oh, I
and I
like that
feel
one.
like this. What? Sorry.
I like that one.
It was pretty good. I enjoyed my playthrough of it, and this music reminds me of something you would hear in like this not seat, I'm sorry, in the Shinra headquarters for Soldier, like all the soldier
Mm,
floor. You know what I mean? Like walking around the floor, it feels very much like something that would fit in there. I feel like I've heard this in a bunch of Japanese games that are anime inspired when you're waiting in some type of office. Like doesn't it stands out because you hear it all the time, not because it's like anything like groundbreaking, if that makes sense.
yeah, like I don't sit there in my chair bopping along to it while I'm walking through the police station. I'm just like, okay, I'll turn the volume down a little bit, get what I need to get done, and then move on to a main mission where hopefully some different music will be playing.
Usually some type of metal or like orchestral
Yeah.
stuff, which is honestly really good. I really enjoyed all of that. But let's move on. Do you have any final thoughts actually before we move on, I should say? Do you have any final thoughts on the music, visuals and aesthetic of this game before we start talking about gameplay?
Um, yeah, I just wanted to flag as well that the music in the actual cutscenes when something dramatic is happening is also really good. Does a really good job of highlighting epic moments. So yeah, just thought that was worth a shout
Yeah,
out.
I'd agree with that. And because sometimes, like you'll have games where the music doesn't match the tone of the scene, where the scene is like supposed to be something really the scene is supposed they're trying to get you to make it feel like the scene is epic, but when what's actually happening would be something that's not. So the music feels out of sync with what the
Yeah,
game is trying to present, and it never feels like that with this. I actually I agree with you on that. The cutscene music is really good.
yeah,
But yeah, so for the gameplay, the primary crux of the gameplay is you are controlling your legion. And I was worried at first about this, man. I was really worried about how you were going to be able to do this. I thought it was going to be unintuitive. So the way it works, listeners, for those who have not played it, is you can summon a legion and you summon your legion and you can move if you hold, I want to say it's like R2, I want to say, or the R trigger, or is it maybe the L trigger? I forget which side of it is on. I think it's the R trigger
yeah. I
on the
think it's
right side.
ZR.
Yeah, ZR. There you go. ZR for us Americans. Um, everywhere else in the world does Z. We just have to be different.
You nearly made
Um,
me spit out my water.
or sorry, I'm from Philly. It's Wooder.
You nearly met. That's not a Philly accent. Never mind. Let's move
Dude,
on.
I can't even do a Philly accent, and I live close to Philly. I've never been able to. I don't say like hoagie or anything like that.
Nearly made me spit out
I
me water. Oh, no, that's just an Australian
Wooder.
accent.
You just went with your.
Oh God, I'm not good at this.
Anyway, no. So I was really worried that it was going to be unintuitive because the way you control your legion, like I said, you hit ZR, ZR, and when you're holding that in, you use the left joystick. What is or no, sorry, your right
It's the right.
joystick. Yeah, the right joystick, the camera joystick, and you can then move your legion around independently of your character. If you're not holding in ZR, then your legion will move with your character if it's summoned. You can also, unsummon it and it won't follow you around at all. But your legion can only move a certain distance away from you because of the chain. And I was worried about that, man. I was really worried that this game was going to get too complex with asking you essentially to move your character with one joystick and move your legion with another. But it never really got out of hand for me. Did it at all for you?
I gotta be honest, I struggled with the controls for a very long period of time, and I don't feel like I ever mastered them, especially in battle. And
What difficulty did you play on by any chance?
I had to bump it down to casual.
Okay, so I played on casual the whole time.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's because I have so much muscle memory with games like Bayonetta, which are somewhat faster paced, and you're not controlling basically two characters at the same time. So it's like I had to try and forget everything that I'd learned in previous action games and try and reteach myself how to walk. So uh, yeah, I struggled, and I don't think I ever ended up mastering it. Uh, I don't think I ever ended up mastering it to the degree that I mastered games like Bayonetta or even Near Automata. Like it has a flow to the battle and stuff that I can pick up on and get really good at in those types of games. But in this one, I never really felt like, yeah, now I'm starting to get good. Like I got a little bit of a flow going, but it was a bit of a struggle. So not my favorite control scheme for a platinum game, but in the end, I didn't mind it. I appreciated that it was different and unique from all the other ones, and I really enjoyed having these two separate characters to try and pull off combos with. I just wish that I felt better about how I did it.
And real quick, just to comment on the difficulty of the game, there are a bunch of difficulty levels. I went with casual because I always go for like normal, and there was three difficulty levels. There was casual, I guess it's standard, casual, and then there was a like cinematic one where you avoid the combat and you can just experience the story of the game.
Was there
So
really?
yeah, at least for me, there was.
Oh, I thought it was casual, standard, and hard.
Well, you can get the hard difficulty later on. So doing a little bit of research literally right now, I found out that casual is basically easy, standard is basically normal, and then you unlock the hard difficulty excuse me, as you play through. At least for the I don't know if maybe it's different for you. Maybe it was different in your region, but for me, there was normal or standard, casual, and the basically like the cinematic version. So I went with casual thinking it was the normal gameplay level, difficulty level. I barely I did not struggle at all in this game until like the final boss. And so I kind of shudder to think what it would have been like with on the standard difficulty level.
Yeah, I just
But
looked it up as well. Apparently, there was an unchained mode, which is basically just auto battling. So you don't really have to do
yep, that's
anything.
what it was.
Yeah.
And I didn't want that. I wanted obviously the gameplay. Otherwise, if I wanted the story, which I didn't hate the story. I actually kind of liked it. Though I have several unanswered questions that we'll get into in that section. But with this, the cool thing about this game is that you control your legion, and the chain in between you and the legion also is interactive with the environment, with the enemies, I should say specifically. You can, if you control your character and legion independently, you can wrap enemies up with their chain, and and it'll lock them up for a little bit of time until they break free. If an
Hmm.
enemy is charging at you, you can use the chain to basically like almost like clothesline them, and then launch them back off in the opposite direction, which will do damage and stun them. You can also do stuff like I want to say, uh, if you if you get some different abilities, you can dodge and then turn that into like a chain attack type of thing. There's a lot of cool gameplay options from that they use the chain for. Did you find any? I don't. Am I missing anything? Are there any other uses for the chain itself that connects you and the Chimera?
Yeah, you can use it to basically send out your chimera towards an enemy and then pull you, the character, in closer. So it's like,
Oh, yes, and that's also how you use that to traverse different areas as well.
yeah, it's
Um
almost like rubber banding or bungee jumping or something like that.
Mhm, mhm.
I thought that was pretty cool. I loved wrapping them up though, like putting them in chains. That was really
Yep,
cool.
and it was
Oh, that's a whip.
satisfying, man, like, the sound effect of it was really satisfying, and especially if, like, so I use the Sword Legion the most, and we'll go into all of them in just a quick moment. There are 5 different types of legions: Sword Legion, Arrow Legion, Beast Legion, Arm Legion, and Axe Legion. You don't get them all at the beginning. You gain access to them as the game goes on. And I use the Sword Legion the most, but if you upgrade the Sword Legion enough, when you bind an enemy, then both you and the Legion will rush into them and do like a whole like a barrage attack of just melee attacks.
Mhm.
It is like one of the most visceral and satisfying feelings when like you, especially if you do it right, where when you zoom in at the enemy, when you rush into the enemy, if you're attacking the enemy from behind and it's doing crit damage or like higher damage, so you see your legion attacking from the front, you're attacking from behind, and you're just doing crazy amounts of damage. It's so fucking satisfying. I love it.
Yeah, I like the sync attacks as well. So like once you pull off a bunch of combos, you have this little sparkly blue thing that pops up on your Legionus.
I think so, yeah, I
I
think
don't
that's what
know.
lead, something like that.
Your big watch that holds
Yeah.
your Ben 10 watch that has all your legions in it. It will sparkle blue, and if you press I think it's a ZL button, which is your attack. If you press that at the same time, you pull off another little combo move with your legion, and then you can continue your combo, and then another one will pop up, and you can pull that off as well. So you can get these big strings happening, which is really cool.
There's so many cool ways to chain your attacks together as well. Like you also get different abilities for your legions that you can unlock. So if you are controlling your legion's movement when you're holding in ZR, you can then, I think it's, you hit X or Y on the controller, and it'll do whichever of the special moves you've assigned to it. So your legion will get a handful of moves that you can pick and choose from, and you can manually assign it to, you know, whichever thing you want to. And I loved that. I thought that was awesome. It allowed a lot more variety, and each legion has its own skill tree, which the way you unlock different skills, it's a combination of, you get I forget what they're called, it's the gene codes. You collect gene codes from enemy attacks, and other times you need to get, besides just the gene codes from defeating enemies, you also have to find like different types of codes. I forget, what are they like, shit, I
Cores?
forget.
Was it cores?
Not, I don't think is it the cores? It's like,
It's
shit, I'm
basically just
blanking.
items. You just get items, and then you need them to upgrade the thing as well.
Yeah, I'm just blanking on what that item is called. It's gonna bother me that I can't remember. I know gene codes are like the main form. It's almost basically experience. Um,
Yeah.
but you, to unlock different things, you also need to, besides the gene codes, you might also need to have like the different types of I'm gonna, it's gonna drive me nuts. I'm gonna find the items and I'll let you know. I'll figure it
Okay.
out. God damn it.
I'm
Um,
pretty sure it's some sort of core or like I don't know. Never mind. Let's move on.
it's something like that. Yeah. What was, I mentioned before there's 5 different legions.
Yes.
What are some of your favorites, Adam? Like, which one did you like to use the most? And just kind of talk a bit about the legions in general. Like,
Okay.
what are your thoughts on all the different options there?
All right. So you mentioned that you use the Sword Legion the most. I
Yeah.
avoided using the Sword Legion because I thought it's your first default one. Most people are probably going to use that through the entire game. I don't want to use that because I'm cool. I'm different. So the other ones that you can unlock is the second one is the Arrow Legion, who is like a ranged attacker, obviously, because it uses arrows. I quite liked using that. So when I got that one, I used that a lot. And then you also get the Beast Legion, which is basically just a big police dog or a wolf of some kind. That one was all
Mhm.
right. I didn't mind it. You can ride it in the level. I thought that was pretty cool. It's kind of unwieldy though, so if you want to collect corruption thingies while you're riding the beast, it's hard to get it all in one fell swoop, basically. So I did use that one quite a bit just in the field, but never really in battle because I didn't like how it played.
Mm.
Um, my favorite was the Arm Legion, who is this big, hulking, basically piece of armor. It's kind of like that Elric brother from,
Oh, from Full Metal Alchemist?
yeah, what's Alphonse?
Alphonse, yeah.
Yeah, he's kind of like a robot cyberpunk version of Alphonse, and he just has these big fists, and he's kind of like your he's kind of like your strength character, but you can also wear that legion as basically a suit of armor and then use it to like uh rock'em sock'em robots punch a bunch of stuff. So that was really cool. So I defaulted to using basically that one and uh oh gosh, what was the other one? So that
Axe.
one, yeah. I didn't use Axe too much. Axe is cool. It's the last one that you get, but you get it so far into the story that by the time that I had gotten it, I was like, I'm not interested in this one all that
He
much.
also moves crazy slow.
Yeah, I do like it has an ability to defend you. It has like this big sort of dome of protection that comes over you, which is very useful in boss fights. So if you pull that up while you're getting completely hammered by a boss, it negates all the damage. So it's very useful in that respect. But I didn't use it as my damage dealer. I
Mhm.
used the arm one as my damage dealer, and I also used the arrow one because I felt like it was the probably the weakest and least appreciated. So I wanted to give it some love.
Wait, which one was sorry, was the weakest and most underappreciated?
The arrow one,
The
the
I
long range
yeah,
one.
it I would agree with that, and I still hate it. I did not
Yeah.
I did not enjoy it at
See?
all. And sorry, the reason I asked you to repeat it is because I was still trying to look up that damn it's material codes.
Oh, see,
That's what they're
codes,
called. That's the
cores.
so you have gene codes, which is like the experience points, and then you have to get material codes, which is like, there's rare, there's ultra rare, and there's all these different other ones to unlock the different skills. Um, no, but or the different skills of the legions. But no, I can understand why you kind of like it. It's weird that it almost feels like everyone agrees. I shouldn't say everyone, that I kind of had the same opinion as you, even though we didn't talk about it prior to this. That the Arrow one is not the favorite of most people, and I
Yeah.
don't. I
It's good
shouldn't say
though.
that.
I mean,
It's definitely better than some of the others. It's more useful than a lot of the other ones,
yeah,
because
I
there's ranged
sorry.
enemies that you kind of need it to help take out.
Yes, exactly. So there are the ones that float up in the sky and stuff, but I
Hmm.
also found that probably going a little bit off track at the moment, but the main character has a basically a police baton thing,
Yep.
and it is a fast sort of standard baton in its original form, but you can also get uh well, it like transforms basically into a gun. And I found that the gun was probably the worst weapon, so I started
Yep.
using that because I was like, I want to see if this underappreciated weapon is any good, and it is good if you want to get some distance from your enemies. And I found that trying a different strategy with ranged attacks using the gun and the arrow legion at the same time, doing the sync attacks with that one, it would fire off like much stronger projectiles. So
Hmm.
that was kind of my strategy was go in with the arms, get some close range attacks in, and then retreat back, use the arrow legion and the gun to pop off some damage and stuff. And yeah, I quite like that. Um, but yeah, also you get the bigger sword as well with the baton, so that was
I
okay.
think I think the thing about this game that I love the most is how deep the combat is. Like there
Yeah,
is so much variety and experimentation that's encouraged in the combat. We're going to get into the second half of the gameplay in just a moment, which is the detective work, which I I didn't hate, but I do think it kind of it takes you out. Like it gets rid of that suspension of disbelief a little bit because you're in the middle of this awesome combat, and then it halts all forward movement in a handful of different sections of the game. And I
yeah,
don't hate the gameplay elements of the detective, like of just walking around the city and asking people, but it did kind of feel a little out of place, especially when the stuff with the legions, which do affect some of the detective mode stuff, and we'll get into that, is so deep. Like the combat, like you have 5 different legions, like we've already mentioned. Each of those legions are good for some type of attack. Sword is kind of your general all around melee. Your arrow is your ranged. Arm is kind of like it's like almost like you're like a monk if you're going by RPG like classes.
Yeah.
It's almost like a monk. And then your beast legion obviously is it's like a dog of some sort, and then your axe legion is your heavy your big brute of a sword type of thing. It's just a huge thing, which I don't know why they call it an axe legion when it's
I
clearly just a
know.
giant fucking sword.
It's a great sword. It should be a great sword legion.
Yeah, which I guess doesn't roll. That kind of ruins the single name. It's sword, arrow, beast, arm, axe. If
Yeah.
they did great sword, it would kind of be a little
Or
bit out of place.
it could have been lance. It's almost like a lance or a
Yeah,
halberd or something. Could have been something like
that
that.
would, like a halberd legion or something, would have made a lot more
Yeah.
sense. And then each one of these legions, we've alluded to it, but just to state it clearly, has a secondary ability that you can use that is used for both in battle and out of battle. The sword legion, if you hit, I think it's just L, just the upper L button,
Yep.
then it creates, then a line will appear on the screen and you can choose how you want to slash, and you use that to break through different locks. And a lot of times they'll have like they'll some of the puzzle areas will have these walls that will move slowly at you, but there's a gap, and the gap on the two sides of the wall is either like diagonal or horizontal or vertical. So you have to get your sword legion out, face the wall that's moving slowly towards you, see which angle they want you to slice at, and then you hit L, and then you kind of move that line that goes across the screen to the angle it's supposed to be at, and then you hit R to slice. And you can do that
Yeah.
against enemies as well. The Arrow Legion will actually let you kind of go into almost like an over the shoulder semi first person view. It's not quite first person, but it kind of acts like that. And you can start shooting the air, like you can start just shooting at enemies like that, almost like it's an FPS. But it does take up energy pretty quickly, which we haven't even talked about that. The Beast Legion, that ability, you mentioned it already, Adam. You can ride the Beast Legion, which is handy in battle to get away from enemies quickly. And then in terms of the puzzle elements, there are some platforms that disappear, and they disappear way too quickly for you to walk across. So you need the Beast Legion to ride across them. The Arm Legion will literally let you hover. Like it almost turns you into like a mech suit, and you can hover over like dangerous puddles and stuff like that.
Dangerous puddles.
And that was my high school band's name, Dangerous Puddles.
Also, before you keep going on, also want to highlight that the Beast Legion is basically a drug sniffer dog as well. So
Yes, yeah.
leads you
And you
to
use that in the detective sections of the game.
yeah. So you get to play out your little fantasy of being a drug sniffer and finding things with a dog. I don't know.
There's a lot of cool, like the fact, I really think the gameplay in this is surprisingly deep. Even though I'm not a fan of the detective sections, all of your legions abilities do something in the detective section just like they
Yeah.
do in the combat and kind of, I don't want to say platforming, but it's like kind of platforming sections. It's not
Yeah, I'll call
quite.
it platforming. Definitely.
Yeah. It's very minimalistic platforming. It's not like you have to do these crazy jumps or anything like that, but there is like some light platforming elements to it. And then the Axe Legion gives you a full on shield that you can like take cover in. I'm not a fan of the Axe Legion, not only because it comes in so late, but also it moves so goddamn slow.
Mm-hmm.
Even when you're not in the
Absolutely.
shield mode, excuse me, you move so fucking slow with the Axe Legion.
Well,
Drove me up a wall. But yes, so each of these legions have skill trees that you can upgrade. So you have to pick and choose which ones you want to upgrade, because you get gene codes from your experience points essentially from battles. So you want to use them wisely. Are you going to parse it all out, like spread it all out, spread the wealth amongst all the legions so everyone gets a little bit leveled up? Or are you going to go into one or two legions and really like fill out their skill trees so that way they get a tons and tons of different abilities. And I'm not going to list all the abilities for all the legions. There's a lot, but like the Sword Legion, just for example, you can get abilities like perfect dodge plus sync. So if you get a perfect dodge, then you get a sync attack right after that. You can get a chain sync where if you it grants a sync attack after a successful bind, which is that's the thing I was talking about where you kind of rush towards the enemy and you and your legion attack at the same time. Um, Round sword, which kind of summons a blade that rotates around the sword legion. That's one of the skills that I mentioned where if you are controlling your legion independently of your character, that's one of the things you can equip to your legion. There's power charge, there's auto bind, there's a bunch of sword assault, sword spin, speed star. That's just a triple sword is the last one. I'm not going to list every single thing, but
Didn't you
that's
just do
all
that?
just I listed almost everything, and the crazy
Except
thing is
one.
that's only for one legion.
Yeah. No, it's basically all of the legions have their own equivalent to that, and they're all
Hmm.
very similar, but I mean, I shouldn't say similar. They play to that legion's strength. So obviously the arrow legion will be, more ranged attacks and so on and so forth. But yeah, it's really cool that all of them have all these different abilities that you can use in battle. And even though you're limited to two at a time, I feel like it still gives you the opportunity to really experiment with how you want to customize each of them and how you want to use them in battle. So if you have one that has a particular ability that you like, you can put that on. Or if you're feeling foxy, you can switch it up for a different ability. And yeah, the combinations are basically endless. There's like 20.
And then at the police station, you can upgrade the amount of damage that, in general, that your legion does, or you can upgrade the amount of damage that your baton slash gun slash heavy baton does.
Hmm.
And I always found myself going back and forth between the two. I kind of evenly upgraded them both, so that way they were both kind of doing decent amounts of damage. And now your legions, we haven't brought this up until now. Your legions can only be summoned for a certain amount of time. There is a timer bar that goes down. Now, every time you defeat an enemy, that bar can refill. Also, I had a thing where if I defeat an enemy, it healed me. So if I got hit and you use one that finish off move that you can get, because if you lower an enemy's health to a certain extent, then you are given like a quick, like if you want to, you'll see a quick time event pop up, but it's not like a mandatory one, and you can hit that to finish off the enemy. And at least for me on the casual mode, it healed my health. So I very seldomly had to use items to heal because I could keep just doing it through combat.
Yeah. No, same habit for me. I think it might be one of the default notches on the skill tree. So if you're just upgrading each of the legions, you will eventually come to it. Yeah, it's a useful ability. But I gotta say, I kind of wish that the timer or the time limit wasn't there, because I think it would have just been a little bit smoother if you didn't have to worry about using a legion for a certain amount of time or whatever. Like, just take that aspect out of it and play as per normal. Because I really didn't get into too many situations where I ran out of time and had to put it away. It was almost always out, and the bar was almost always filled. So it kind of seemed like a useless addition, maybe.
Hmm. I'm kind of with you on that. I think their intention was to kind of create a risk reward situation where, if you leave your legion out, you can do a lot more damage. And also, they can act as a distraction from the enemy so you can run away and heal. But if you leave them out for too long, then they have to go away and recharge, and then you have to wait to summon them again until it has been recharged, which the recharge isn't long either. It's only a couple seconds, but in the
Yeah.
middle of a fight, that can mean the difference. I think at least in casual they were a little too forgiving with that. I feel like if they would have made they either have to remove it entirely, like you said, or make it just a little bit more challenging. I'm not saying a lot more, but I think just a little bit more would have definitely improved the use of it. Because right now, I think it's a good idea because it's meant to force you to not rely entirely on your legion, but at the same time, they almost make it too easy. Where like you might as well just rely on your legion because they just keep regaining that like time barred, like incredibly easily.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
I just found that it's almost sort of counterintuitive because the main character, yeah, they can do a decent amount of damage and stuff, but they're not really supposed to be played by themselves. So you can't really go into all these battles and just beat it with the main character and not have the Legion there. So it's kind of like, why don't you just keep it so that the Legion is always out and then tweak the balance of the combat so that it offers maybe more of a challenge in the difficulty aspect rather than having to manage this time limit, because like the energy that they have also dwindles a lot faster if you're using their special abilities and stuff. So
Mhm.
it's kind of like, why don't you just have like an MP bar or a stamina gauge that refills so you can use your abilities, but keep the Legion out indefinitely because it feels like they're supposed to be there indefinitely anyway.
I mean, they there's in every aspect of the game, they kind of scream that your legion is necessary. Like you might as well keep it
Yeah.
out because in the detective sections, which we can get into now, the detective sections of the game where you are exploring like a couple blocks, like a block radius of the city. It's like a couple blocks, and you have to. There's some type of happening that's going on in the game world, and you have to talk to civilians on the street and get like eyewitness accounts, and you can pick up little side quests and take notes. You can also use your legions for a lot of different things in the detective section. You mentioned before, Adam, about the beast legion, how you can use it as like a sniffing dog where you can give it a scent and it will track it down. It is weird. Did you hear the moment where they explained how the beast legion like tracks scents down?
I think so. It was something to do with like genetics or DNA or something like that.
Yeah, it was like because you have people's like genetics on like some type of data file, it can smell like the DNA and then check it with like the DNA registry, and then they track the DNA. It's very odd. Like
Yeah.
it was unnecessary. You could have just said it's a lead. You could have just like you didn't. You suspended my disbelief. It's something that looks like a dog. I don't need to know why this like digital chimera that looks like a dog has the ability to smell humans. Like you didn't have to explain it. I believed you without having the explanation.
But it's a robot thing. Robot things don't have senses of smell. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of some counter argument. But yeah, it was a bit weird. It was a strange decision to do that.
Yeah, I thought so too. But the sword legion can remove redshift from people. There's like I mentioned at the top of the episode, redshift is kind of like this, like almost like contamination coming in from the different world that like can make people sick and eventually can actually turn them into chimeras and monsters. So your sword legion can remove redshift from them and it makes them feel better. Your sword legion, and I think others, can also eavesdrop. So if you see people who are talking and if you try to walk up and ask them and they're not going to tell you, well, you can send your legion over and eavesdrop and listen in on their conversation, so that way you know what you need to do for the next section of the detective area.
I love that. It's like voyeurism in a game or whatever, just listening into other people's conversations. It's very me.
Excuse
I
me.
do that all the time. I'm like, "Ooh, what are they talking about? Ooh, what are they talking about?"
You
Um,
just need your own legion.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, speaking of these detective sections, I really like them in theory, but
Same.
my criticism is that I feel like there is way too much stuff to do in these sections. They fill it out with all this extra stuff that is completely unnecessary. And after a couple of times of doing the same sort of stuff over and over again, I started to get really, really bored of it because it really slows down the pace of the game. But I can see the appeal because I definitely, when I approached this, was like, "Ooh, now I can live out my fantasy of being a detective. Oh, you need me to save a cat? I can do that. You need me to track down a red ghost that's in armor? Yeah, I can do that too." And yeah, so that was kind of fun. But after five or six, it's probably more than that, maybe like 10 different
There's a
sections where
lot
it's
of yeah.
yeah, and they go for quite a long time. So you'll probably spend like an hour and a half in maybe even 2 hours, 2 to 3 in one section where you're helping out the populace that lives there. You're investigating so and so's missing whatever. Somebody stole something from someone, so you need to track down the item. Blah 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 blah. Basically, all sort of side quest stuff. After X amount of times of doing that, when I got towards the end of the game, in about file 8, 9, and 10,
Hmm.
I skipped all of that extra stuff. I was like, I'm just going to go straight for the story, going to gun it, I'm going to do the action, and I'm going to finish. And I really liked doing that. But yeah, it's that this game has a pacing issue, I think, and it's mainly down to the detective stuff, which is a bit of a shame.
I agree, and I feel like if they would have separate like the detective stuff, what's interesting about that is they could have removed it entirely or pared it down greatly and put it into its own game. Like I'm not saying it's an Astral Chain game, but like the detective stuff is deep enough. Like you could have like imagine like a small like it's not quite open world, but like a small openish exploratory game where you have to like investigate around the city and you can use your like supernatural powers to be able to like eavesdrop and like help people and stuff like that. Like there's enough of a gameplay loop in here to be interesting, but when you're pairing it with this action game and the story, you kind of just want like the action is better than the detective work. And like like we already talked about how deep the action gameplay is. It's incredibly deep. There's so much to it. There's so much variety and encourages so much experimentation that you don't need the detective bit at all in this game to make this game good. Like you could have just kept the action segments and it would have been good with a little bit of maybe some conversation exploratory stuff just for like juxtaposition, just for pacing. But
Yeah,
if I think they could have kept this detective section, pared it down a decent amount just to have a little bit more, a little bit less to do in it, and I think it would have been a much better paced game because as of now, I think my total playtime I spent like 24 hours playing this game. Um, you could have probably cut down 6 hours of it just from the detective sections, and I think it would have been a much more concise game. And I only reason I don't think I got burnt out by it is because I played it so piecemeal over the course of like 2 or 3 months. I would only play like an hour at a time during my lunch breaks at work. And
mm.
so I never felt like I was like playing too much or getting overwhelmed by it. I feel like the detective sections are meant more for padding than for actual story progression. And in the story, I think they should be there, but if they just pared it down a little bit, man. I don't. Do you agree with that? Would you like the detective sections to be there still, or do you think you should remove them entirely?
Oh no, I think they have their place. They deserve to be there, but it's just how much of it is worth being there. Like, there are the sections like, for example, the one that I mentioned earlier about finding out about the red glowing phantom suit of armor or whatever it is. That's tied to
Hmm.
the actual story. If they just had these specific story investigations and that was it, that would be great. But there's like the story investigation, but then there's like 5 or 6 other cases that are going on at the same time, which are completely irrelevant. And you do get like experience points and rewards for doing it, but I never felt like when I got to the end of the game that those rewards actually benefited me that well. So for example, you get material codes or whatever from a couple of side quests and stuff. Great. But you can also get that elsewhere by doing the actual main story and just defeating enemies. If they had something that was like, like a proper RPG where if you want to unlock an ultimate weapon for your legion or something like that, do X side quest to get special item to unlock special skill or something like that. You know what I mean?
I could see that. I could see that.
Yeah.
Or no, what I think would have been a little bit better. You could have done like kept the same amount of side quest stuff, but like what you would do like when you have those downtimes in the police station. Actually, they do this at the end of the game.
Oh, yeah,
When
they
you
do.
beat the game, you can talk to oh my gosh, I'm blanking on her name. I can look it up.
Daisy, Olive,
Olive,
Brenda.
thank you. It's
Yeah.
Olive. Daisy.
I don't know.
Olive, yeah. If you can talk to Olive and she gives you a list of different missions and they're little side missions, and because it's not interrupting the flow of the story and the narrative. It kind of feels a little bit more like, honestly, kind of what Crisis Core did. Like we were talking about Crisis Core earlier. In that game, it has tons of side missions, and you can access them at any time from the menu. So you can
Right.
play through the game, and when you want to like level up, or if you want to get, if we're going with Astral Chain here, you want more gene codes and material codes, you can just go do a bunch of those side quests and like kind of grind those up. Um,
Actually, that's a really good point because now that I think about it, I think it has more to do with how you approach the game because typical of these sort of platinum games, there's extra battles and stuff and extra side stuff that you go and do to get as high of a score as you possibly can. Like Bayonetta, for example. There are optional fights hidden off the path somewhere that you can go and do and get a platinum trophy on. If they did something, I mean, they do something similar to that in Astral Chain, but a game like Bayonetta is a lot more succinct and
mhm.
shorter, so it makes replaying certain levels to get those achievements or higher rankings in battles or side stuff uh, not as important or not as much of a hurdle. But when you approach a game like Astral Chain, it's almost like myself personally, I feel like I need to do everything that's available to do at that
Yeah.
given point. But I think the way it's supposed to be approached is like an older Bayonetta or something where you go through the story at your leisure, do it if you want to do it, and then once the game is fully completed, you have the option to go back and then tackle the side stuff so you get more stuff out of the game rather than burning yourself out in that moment attempting to do every single side thing in like chapter 10 for example, which takes like 3 to 4 hours. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's sort of where I went wrong. Is I'm like, I want to do all of this. I want to get all the benefits of it, and then um, finish the game and be done with it. And because the game is so long, it doesn't feel like an older platinum game where you finish it once and then can replay it several times to get better scores and all that sort of stuff. This feels more like a one and done kind of game because it's so long. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, the way they do it is that it's a one and done thing, because
Yeah,
you can't go back to do those old side quests. Like if once you complete
I
a
think you
chapter,
can.
can you? Oh, I guess.
Yeah. There's a chapter select or something that you can go back and do certain chapters and then actually load yourself into a certain point within that chapter to then tackle the side stuff. So
Oh,
yeah, it
no,
should
I
be
yeah, I
approached
didn't know
as
that.
do the story and then if you want to do the side stuff, go back and do the side stuff later. I think that's probably the healthier way to approach it.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Um, all right, yeah, that makes more sense then. Yeah, because I'm with you. I think if you do all the side quests, it ruins the pacing of the game for sure.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on gameplay though, Adam? Before we move on to story and characters and all that good stuff.
Um yeah, one of the side things that you can do is rescue cats, which I
Oh
thought was kind of
yeah,
nice.
and you have a whole cat sanctuary, and there's a character. Is it Marie? I think.
Yeah, I
No,
think so.
is it? Yeah, it might be Marie. Um, she is. I think, and there's a guy who likes Marie, who wants to who's like really in love with cats, and so you help save cats for them and for yourself. Let's be real, it's for
Yeah.
yourself too.
And then you get to go into the sanctuary and then feed the cats, and then they'll give you items.
Wait, really?
Yeah, so in the police headquarters section, once you meet a certain character that lets you basically fast travel to any level of the police station, there's an option at the bottom where you can go to the cat sanctuary place, and then you,
Oh, I didn't know that because I never
yeah.
used the fast travel.
But there's like a little food bowl that you put cat food in or something like that, and then all the cats that you've rescued to that point come in and eat, and then once the little cutscene's over, there's an item that's left over.
Okay, okay. And actually, some other things that had just popped in my head. There's with your legions, other gameplay mechanics. I mean, or elements. your legions, there's maintenance for them. You actually have to
Ugh,
put them in, and you can like, which I think is stupid. I
it's
don't actually
useless.
like that at all. I don't know. Like, I'm assuming it's supposed to like make them more powerful or speed them up or something like that. But I don't know. I didn't pay any attention to the damage numbers. Just enemies went down, and that made me happy. So I cleaned them up all the time, but I don't know how much of a difference it actually made. You can change the look and color of your legion, or the color scheme of your legions. Did you experiment with that at all? I didn't, because I'm lazy, but did you at all?
Um, I did very briefly, but then
Mm.
I didn't like that it then didn't match my police costume. So I was like, default all the way, keep it default.
Can't you change the color of your police costume though?
Yeah, but who has time to go and do that? And then also, if your police costume is a different color to the other police officers that are in the cutscene, it just looks
Mm.
stupid. Then I
Yeah.
don't feel like I'm part of a team. Then I feel like I'm the flamboyant police officer that wants extra attention because I got a pink outfit, whereas everybody else is wearing the standard blue. So, you know.
No, I can see what you're saying with that. All right, yeah. Then unless you have anything else, we can move on to the story section of the game.
Yeah, I think I'm good.
All right. So this is a spoiler wall, y'all. There is spoilers to be had in this section. So if you don't want to know anything more, I guess the last thing I'll say before the full spoiler section is just for those who don't know, the main plot of the game. I gave the whole setup at the beginning of the episode, but the main plot of the game is you play as your protagonist. Your last name is Howard, and you have a sibling named Akira. So whether you play as the girl twin or the boy twin, you have a sibling, and Akira is their name regardless. And whoever is your twin, whoever Akira is, whether boy or girl, is the younger twin of the protagonist, which is kind of silly to me. I mean, I like, why did you even specify that? What is it, like a couple seconds? But whatever, or a couple minutes. But you as the protagonist don't have any dialogue. The main thing is that you are trying to stop this war, not this war. You're trying to solve this chimera problem. And in the beginning of the game, this is a mild spoiler for the setup of like kind of like what you're doing. But your dad, who is the kind of like the captain of the task force you're on, his name is Maximilian. He gets stuck the in the other dimension. He gets stuck in the dimension with the chimeras, and you don't know if he's dead or alive, and you have to kind of progress on and see what you can do to hopefully get him out and solve this chimera problem. So that's the basic plot. And then of course there's plot twists and other stuff. But is there anything that you think we should let the listeners know, Adam, about the general plot before we go into spoilers?
Uh, no, I think that pretty much covers it.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure I wasn't missing anything.
No, I think everything else is kind of spoilery enough, and I do think that this game, the story should be experienced for yourself. Not saying that it's necessarily the best thing in the world, but if you want to enjoy the story, come in with very little expectations or
Now,
very little knowledge.
well, we can do this for those who don't want to get things spoiled. Did you enjoy the story, Adam? Overall, did you like it? It's not perfect, like we said. I agree with you on that. Did you like it, or were you kind of more neutral on it, or did you dislike it?
I think I was lukewarm. I liked it, but I think it could have. Uh, let's just say I think it had the potential to be a lot better.
I kind of agree with the lukewarmness that you're talking about. Like it could be better, it could be worse. There's the setup is really strong. I think my biggest beef with the story is that it gives you a lot of explanation for things, and then there's other things that they never fucking bring up again, or they leave these like really tantalizing threads that you just want to pull,
Yes.
but you can't because they don't give you anything more to it. So I real quick for myself, I did really like this story. It's not anything fantastic, actually. A friend of the show, Dave Jackson, when I was talking to him about it when I was playing it, and he hates the story. I'm like, I don't think it's that bad. I actually really kind of liked it. I can understand the lukewarmness that you would have for it, but I didn't. I kind of really enjoyed it. But we'll get into it all here. So this is the spoiler wall. We are
Dave hates
going.
everything, by the way.
I mean, he likes Souls games.
Yeah, I like Souls games, but Dave hates things for no reason.
Dave, we love you. Um,
Yeah, he
but
does.
no,
I mean, I do too.
I'm the opposite. I like almost everything with the exception of Souls games.
Oh, just cancel the show. I'm walking.
I
The
don't blame
episode
you.
is over.
I've already ranted about it enough. I'll tell you off my issues with them. But in any case, um, yes, spoiler wall is happening now. The the big plot and the big kind of plot twist in this is that, or the overall plot of this game is, you basically all of you and everyone in this neuron task force is, you all get your own legion and you go into the astral plane, which is, I mentioned before, your father Maximilian gets stuck there. They make it seem like he is still alive, and they they never fucking bring him up again. Like, they talk, like they bring him up, I should say, in terms of them, the kids missing him, but they
Hmm.
really leave like this thread there that, like, oh, could he be alive, could he not be alive, because you never see him actually die. You get a mild hint that he is dead, where, like, in he had the axe legion, and so when in the scene where your father gets trapped in the astral plane, where Maximilian gets trapped in the astral plane, all of the other members of the neuron task force, they also have their own legions, and all the legions break free. Yours does as well, but you are able to recapture it. And as the game goes along, you capture all the legions that were that had escaped from the other members of the neuron task force. And you do eventually get your father's legion. And so they have this type of, like, this subtle hint that, like, your father's, like, in, like, his spirit is in that legion and he's with
Yep.
you via that, but it's not very strongly broadcasted. And once again, you never see your father die, and there's no other precedent for a human possessing a chimera. You know what I mean? There's not, they leave that thread wide open, and I'm kind of bummed about that. What are your thoughts, though?
No, I agree. Like the way that they set up his disappearance slash death is very anime in the sense of, oh, you don't see him die. He's definitely coming back at some point. But then it's like this weird sort of moment where it hints that maybe he is his legion or he's inside his legion or he's, I don't know. But it just doesn't give you a definitive answer. And, I'm fine with ambiguous storytelling, but if it doesn't make any sense as to how or why he could be in or is this legion, then
Mm,
I'm not satisfied. So I wish that they would have at least had, I don't know, his severed arm be present with his legion or something. Like give me some sign that he is dead or he isn't dead, and just a little nod to this Axe Legion. And I think, come to think of it, it was like a the camera was like on the Axe Legion, and then it had like this overlay of the father, um, pre-death, and then it was only there for like a little bit, and then it disappears. And so I don't know if they're applying. I don't know if they're implying that he is in the Legion, or if the Legion is sort of representative of how the character feels about their father, and it's like the bond that they've created,
mhm.
having tamed this Legion. I don't know. It's very very ambiguous. So kind of disappointing about that.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. It really feels like they left a thread dangling there, and they
Yeah,
don't really ever get around to it. Um,
yeah. It's like when you
as
do a shit, and there's still some shit in your ass hair, and you think you've got it all, but there's you just got one little dangle
I,
dingleberry.
I was so confused. I was like, "What did he say?" Because I was like, it cut out just for a second for me, so I heard shit, and then I'm like, then I heard a little bit in your ass here. I'm like, oh, he's talking about the dingleberries. Okay,
Yeah,
I see
it's
the
a
thread, and then you,
dingleberry of a plot point.
oh, and there's a couple dingleberries of a plot point in this
Yeah.
game, and we'll kind of get to them in just a moment. But you. the leader of this task force Neuron is this guy named Yosef Calvert. Yosef is a hell of a name. Actually voiced by a guy named Joseph Joe J Thomas in the North in English, which I thought is kind of funny.
Oh,
So Joseph is voiced by Joseph. So go figure.
um, on that, I think I did something very similar with an episode that we covered on A Way Out, which was made by Joseph, someone or other. I can't remember the name. Anyway, they're like European of some kind, so I kept
Hmm.
calling him Yosef just out of like habit of thinking every European J is a Y.
Oh, then my
Uh,
name is Joshua.
yeah, yeah, you would be if you were European. Oh, Joseph Farris, that's his name. And the whole time through that episode, I
Okay.
kept calling him Yosef. And I'm like, what is wrong with you? It's not like a Jesus Jesus situation here.
Uh,
But yeah, that
Yosef
guy,
and Joseph.
Yosef in the game, it's very obvious from the beginning cutscene that he is a little bit sinister.
He might not be a nice guy. He
Yeah.
might be evil. Evil.
Mm.
Which we find out later, very much so. At least that's not a dingleberry of a plot thread. You find that out pretty like you learn that at the end of the game. Spoiler alert! Once again, he is the final boss. Um,
Yeah.
we'll
But the
we'll
thing
get to.
is,
Oh,
oh,
sorry. Go ahead.
sorry.
No, no, go
But
ahead.
but the thing is, you never really find out why he's evil. He has some sort of motivation that he says, but you don't really find out why his
Well,
motivation is what it is.
yeah, that describes it perfectly. His motivation is he wants to save the world, but you don't understand how his evil plan it saves the world at all. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't make any fucking sense.
It's very
Um,
much like a Neon Genesis Evangelion instrumentality project kind of thing, if you're familiar with that anime. But it's like merging the human race with the Chimera corruption in order to save it or something like that. But, you
mhm.
know, why does he come to this conclusion? No one knows.
He's a
What is
genius.
Yeah, like what is his personal motivations in order to do this? Like you find out nothing about the backstory of who this character is, other than he's a guy who was doing a thing who wants to now save the world, but in the end, the way that he's saving the world ends up to be evil or something like that. You know what I mean?
I mean, you do know a little bit about him because one of the people you think is a villain is someone who used to work for him, Jenna
Yeah.
Anderson. And you get the idea that she doesn't like him because she's able to kind of see through his guise of like doing this for the greater human good. But real quick before we continue on, other members of the Neuron Task Force, I just want to list them out. Alicia Lopez and Jin Wong, both of them are members of the task force. All these characters, like they introduce them to you like they're going to be like, here's your partners in crime or your partners in, I guess, law enforcement for the rest of the game, and you don't really deal with them at all. At most, you deal with your sibling a little bit, but that's about it. Um, there's there are other characters who kind of work in the Neuron Task Force office. So like Jin and Alicia and your father Max before he disappears and apparently dies, they'll at least go out in the field with you, sort of like they're there in the field, but you don't really play with them all that much. There's a character named Marie Wentz who is uh she's kind of like
Lappy.
she's what, plucky, is that what you said?
Lappy.
Yeah, she's Lappy, the mascot for the police department, but she thinks that no one realizes that she is. I actually kind of like that joke. She thinks no one knows that she is Lappy, like inside the mascot suit, and everybody knows that she's Lappy.
Yeah, I liked the Lappy inclusion because it kind of happens around sort of the third file or third chapter. And up until this point, everything seems relatively serious in the way that an over the top anime action thing can be serious. And then you suddenly have this comedic relief mascot dog that appears, and I go, oh, Japan, classic Japan. Thank you.
Mascots for everything.
Yeah. I will buy that Lappy plush when you eventually sell it if you haven't already. So,
I'm sure there
yeah,
has to be one somewhere,
it's got to be
at
like,
some point.
yeah, I would buy it. It's a cute character design. It's very Japanese, and I appreciate its input in this game.
Same, very much same.
Mm.
There is another character named Olive Espinoza who apparently used to be a newscaster, but joined the Neuron Task Force after witnessing some damage done to the Ark. I'm reading this off the wiki. I did not know that was her backstory.
No,
Go
I didn't
figure.
either.
And she now is kind of like your, excuse me, she's now an operator who kind of does a lot of the logistical work for the task force. You know, like, hey, you have a mission over here, go there. Here's what your next assignment is. Here's how to like, and kind of delegating things out. You have the doctor of the office, Brenda Moreno, and then you have your technician who you meet midway through named Harold Hal Clark. You don't actually see him in person. He just operates this little yellow drone dude, which I thought was kind of weird at first, but kind of cool.
Yeah.
And then Jenna Anderson is like the villain that you think is the main villain. She's a former researcher who went missing 20 years prior to the events of the game. And now she is a terrorist attacking the Ark, and you don't know why. And there's one other character I'll mention in a moment, but he shows up later on in the game. But basically, all you're doing in the beginning of this game is you are going around to different sections of the Ark City and stopping chimeras from attacking. And you do realize you can go into the astral plane, the astral dimension, and fight chimeras in there, or rescue people who were taken into there by chimeras. And if you get to them quick enough, which there's no timer, like it's the quickness is relative, but excuse me, you just have to get in there and rescue them and bring them out. And those are sometimes those are side missions, other times those are main storyline beats. But basically, where this story actually kind of breaks down is that Jenna is Jenna, the researcher. She is attacking the Ark and specifically trying to go after Yosef. And she brings you things called homunculus or homunculi, and the homunculuses eat chimeric energy. They actively absorb it all, and she is trying to find a way to completely stop the chimera and stop Yosef, because she knows that whatever Yosef is doing is bad. So a lot of the game is you just kind of putting out fires that she starts. But while all this is happening, there are people who like you find out there are people kind of starting their own like weird groups, like almost other terrorist factions, and specifically a group called the Hermits, which are a group of hackers. And I love the Hermits, man. Did you like this section of the game when you were playing against the Hermits, specifically their leader Kyle?
Yes, I did. I At this point in the game, this is where I sort of thought, "Oh, the story's really picking up now. It's gonna go places." And you meet these hermits, you fight this guy, everything is super interesting, and then all of a sudden, it's like they never come back again or have anything to do
Yeah.
with anything.
Well, I mean, well, like they do. It's basically like the Hermits are kind of like the mid game climax where
Yeah.
like it builds up, and then the Hermits are basically getting this stuff. I think it's called like what, Blue Shift or something like that.
Yeah, I
Um,
think so.
and it's basically like this thing you can drink, which will kind of give you a little bit of like chimeric powers. But if you drink too much of it, then you turn into chimeras. And uh, he is trying to basically fight back against the Ark, just like Jenna is, but in kind of a different way. So I love that we talked before about the visual aesthetic of the game. Kyle's visual aesthetic, his design is so fucking cool.
Mhm. It
I
reminded me a lot of
love it.
sorry. It reminded me a lot of Borderlands.
Yeah, I could see that. A
Yeah.
combination of like Borderlands and Ghost in the Shell.
Yeah, it was cool.
Just because, like, you ever see Ghost in the Shell standalone complex, like the first season?
I have, yes, I actually really like that show.
I really liked that first season. I never watched the second. I really should, but I liked the first season a ton. And like the whole isn't like from what I remember, it's been a long time since I watched it. But there's like that like that happy smiley face thing that keeps showing up. He's kind of his face. He has like this digital face mask. Kind of reminds me of that. It's very kind of. It doesn't look like that like visually, but it just kind of reminds me of like this. You know, he's a hacker, so it's like digital terrorism sort of. I love his character. He's really fun.
Yeah, but then he doesn't come back.
Well, it's because he it his storyline is set up and then it's ended. Like he
Yeah.
tries to basically attack you and take control. They get your legion. All of his soldiers drink a bunch of that blue shift potion. They turn into chimeras. He's like, "What the fuck?" And then they have to run away. And then he's pretty much done. Like I really wish he would have come back. I agree. I think they kind
Yeah,
of
like
did a little bit of disservice, but I understand at the same time, like he finished his story. It would have been cool if they did like a whole at the very end. It's a little cheesy, but like the friends we made along the way type of ending, where maybe Kyle
yes.
came to help you or something.
Exactly. I think that's what needed to happen is I think all the characters that were introduced up to that point needed to have some sort of input in a final battle, or there's some big threat happening and then all these characters unite and then help you out along the way. They might not necessarily be in the final battle, but maybe they're on the street level and they're fighting chimeras to help you get to where you need to go or something like that. Like bring them all back together because you've set up these characters, pay them off, and you know, have them be a part of the finale.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I it because there are like even Jenna, like Jenna, at least she has a pretty satisfying climax to her story because she pretty much sets it up to like so there's like two major climax moments in the story until you get to like the final section of the game, right? Like the first one is Kyle, the second one is Jenna, where you find out that your legion can pretty much go full beast mode. Like you can turn into a complete beast. Like you kind of get like merge with your legion and you kind of lose a bit of yourself. You kind of go feral for a little bit. Like it's a really crazy moment, and the only person that can help you is your sibling, whichever sibling you're not playing as. And just when they're about to like calm you down, you get shot at by the police, and you end up like unmerging and like falling into the abyss. And your sibling, there's so much. I feel like I'm jumping around all over the place with this. There's a lot of plot to this game.
Yeah.
Um, the your sibling prior to this, they're part of this group called like the Ravens. Like so, when everyone loses their legions, your sibling is pissed off and jealous that you have your legion and they don't have theirs, and they kind of understandably so are a little bit pissy with you for an extent to an extent. Well, they get injured during one mission, and then Yosef does something to them. You don't know what he does, and all of a sudden they show up and they save you in the middle of a boss fight in this fucking badass black like Legion suit. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah. It's like a dominatrix police officer type of situation.
I like that description. A dominatrix police officer. Hell
She comes
yes.
in wearing her knee-high fuck me boots and got a whip. And she's like, "Let's get this started." She doesn't.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's sort of a classic trope of having two characters that are opposite hang on. Opposite sides of the same coin. So you're like the good light one, and then all of a sudden your brother or sister comes into the story and is now the dark sided one because they're wearing
Hmm.
all black, and then may or may not be. Well, they do end up working against you to some point, to some extent, and yeah, so it's just sort of that classic thing of having a foil to the main character.
Yep. And you know what? Instead of going more beat by beat, I'm just going to jump right to the big plot twist with them. And I literally, when this plot twist happened, I audibly let out like a whoa type of thing. I'm surprised. I'm
I
surprised that
did
it
too.
surprised me so much.
I know exactly what
So
you're going to say, and I did too.
I was genuinely surprised by this. So your your twin, has this fucking badass black Legion suit, has their own Legion all of a sudden that's also like in this black armor, and then they are given a whole bunch of other like soldiers to control, and there's a whole plot point brought up around this, like, hey, we had to train for years for this. Where did Yosef suddenly get all these people that can control their own legion, and they all dress the same way as Akira. Um, like, how does this work? And there's a moment in the story where, like, after you like, your character has been made persona non grata, they're ostracized from the task force. Yosef has put out basically a capture or kill order on you, and your sibling Akira clearly doesn't want to obviously do anything that's going to harm you, so they're not really pushing too hard, but they are trying to find you. And they find you, and you're trying to have a conversation, and then their unit shows up, and their unit takes off all of their helmets when Akira decides that they are not going to capture you, they're going to help you. And so Yosef turns on everybody, turns on you and your sibling and everybody, and they're all clones of your sibling.
Mhm.
It
I
blew my
also
goddamn mind.
Yeah, same. I was like, "Oh, what? What?" It was really cool because I sort of accidentally spoiled myself about the Raven stuff. I was like,
Mm,
"Oh, okay, there's a Raven unit." But luckily, the Wikipedia page I saw didn't have an image of them without their helmets on. So when they took the helmets off, I was still genuinely surprised. I was like, "Whoa, that's cool." And I was like super invested in the story at this point.
yeah, and I think that's why we were talking about it before, how, like, there's moments of this game that they don't explain enough, and there's some that, like, but the story is overall good. It's moments like this that explain, like, show why it's good. Like, there's a moment I audibly was genuinely shocked by a plot twist, and I'm not necessarily the most observant. I can be a little dense when it comes to stories, but even with that, there's very few times where a story will make me, like, be in shock by the plot twist. And it's this plot twist is so damn good, not because it's like anything new, or like, I mean, you've seen something like this in other like in other media, whether it be books or movies or other games, but it's because you weren't fucking expecting it. Like, but it still fits in with the whole sci-fi element of the game world, so it doesn't take you out of the story. Like, it's
Yeah.
honestly a really well crafted plot twist. I genuinely, like, was not expecting, because I was expecting, when they did something to your sibling, to Akira, that, okay, maybe they, like, Yosef put something in their head that's going to make them turn on you, or maybe gave them, like, superpowers that they can't control, so they go fucking crazy. Like, I was expecting that. What were you kind of expecting when you knew, like, Yosef did some sinister tinkering on your sibling? Like, did you what was kind of going through your head when that
Uh,
first happened?
It was pretty much exactly the same. I just had the expectation that because you've got these 2 characters that you select at the beginning of the game, whichever sibling that's left over is going to be the one that turns evil. So I was just expecting them to be fully corrupted by Yosef or something like that. They're gonna have like just be the dark character that you end up having to fight against. I did not expect there to be a whole unit of clones of the same character that, is now fighting against you as well. So that was a genuine surprise. And it kind of reminded me a little bit of like Altered Carbon on Netflix, if you ever get to the
Okay.
end of season 1 of that.
I've
But
never watched it. I think my wife did, but sorry, go
uh,
on.
it's worth a watch, the first season at least. I haven't seen the second.
Hmm.
But I was like, yeah, okay, this is a plot twist that I wasn't expecting, but in the context of the story and the setting, it makes absolute sense that it's plausible and possible. So in that regard, I found it very, very successful. It wasn't some out of left field thing where you go, "What? What do you mean the Axe Legion is your dad?" Like it
Mhm.
made sense. So yeah, it was genuinely very, very good.
Agreed. And the finale of this, essentially, like we said, the villain's reasoning for this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But basically, Yosef, what he does, like, the final boss is Yosef. He wants to merge the two, like, he wants to basically merge the two worlds and become a god of both of them. He wants to absorb all of humanity into him. Like, hold on, how does Wikipedia even fucking describe this, like, bizarre thing? He The player, Yosef, uses the ravens as a catalyst to create the ultimate legion, Noah, and merges himself with it, intending to absorb all life on Earth in order to become a god. Akira ends up being absorbed. Oh, the spoiler, I guess. Akira ends up
We're in the
being
spoiler
absorbed
section.
into Noah while trying to protect you, the player, and then you fight Noah. You fight the giant legion called Noah. Um, I I don't understand how turning into a god saves humanity.
I don't understand how absorbing all of humanity then makes you a god over humanity, because if humanity doesn't exist anymore, what are you a god of?
I mean, a god of the legions of the chimeras. I don't fucking know either.
I
It's
don't
a
know.
really weird. It's uh an unjustified motivation. Like it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Like there's no benefit to him except like, oh, he kind of reminds me a little bit of like, and this is a spoiler alert for Final Fantasy VI, just in case those who haven't played it, like what Kefka is, where he doesn't give a shit about what he rules over. He just wants to rule.
Yeah.
But the way Kefka is portrayed, that makes sense for the character. The way Yosef is portrayed, that doesn't make sense for the character.
Yeah, they needed something to humanize him. And I know it's super cliche, but it just makes me think of like those villains where I don't know, they lost a loved one or a child or something. So their motivation to access this godly power is to bring their loved one back from the dead or something like that. He just needed like that extra little element of humanity to make his reasoning for what he was doing justifiable, I think.
Agreed. One last thing I want to touch on with the story, and then we'll go into just like if then I'll throw it over to you to talk about anything that if you want to bring up anything that we didn't cover with the plot twists and story and everything.
Okay.
Um, the one other big thread, the dingleberry that is not seized upon, they reference it a ton. How you and your sibling were a not you're not the biological children of your dad, of Maximilian, of Max. You were adopted by him. And they keep referencing a specific district. I think it's like District 9, maybe it's District 5. I can't remember. A specific district of the city that the Ark, about how you came from there. And they keep referencing something like ominous happened there, or like your maybe experiments, or maybe like some type of like police brutality thing. I don't fucking know. They don't fucking tell you about it. They reference that something happened there, and that you came from this, so you have some type of kinship to this district. But I don't remember them ever explaining what that was. Did you catch anything? Did I just miss it?
I think you may have missed that one, yes.
Oh, okay.
So,
Explain then.
there's a certain section in the story where Jenna gives you this data card file thing.
Okay, I
And
remember that.
yeah, it contains a bunch of files from Maximilian Howard. And um, at one point, there are a couple of locked files. So at the start of one of the chapters, you're basically forced to read a bunch of files, but a couple of them are locked. If you're clever, not saying that you're not clever, but
No, I'm
um,
not. It's fine.
if you're clever, or if you're like me and you just Google the answer, you can find the password to the locked files, which is
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Yeah, I didn't find the password to the locked files. That was what the issue was.
yeah. So the password is the date that it's quote unquote the twins' birthday, but I'm pretty sure it's the date that he rescued them. And basically, it's not like a huge revelation or anything. It just sort of goes into details about how uh, Max's unit was sent to District 9 and they had to save a bunch of people from the chimeras and stuff. And then at the very end, he can't save everyone, but he manages to save these two twins. And that's basically it. Like, it doesn't really give you an explanation for why they have this unknowable ability to be able to sync with the legions better than anybody else, other than maybe some sort of corruption was happening at that point and they absorbed some sort of element of that. But it's more about the story of Neuron or whoever was in charge of sending out the police force stuff didn't really care too much about rescuing everybody, and at some point had to like pull the pin and get everybody out and leave a bunch of people to die. So that's sort of why I think the hermits are in District 9 and they're really bitter about the Ark, is because they were abandoned there and they managed to sort of evolve in a way which let them survive. And you are from that district and were managed to be taken to safety. So,
Okay.
long story short, it doesn't really give you an explanation.
Doesn't give you a great one. It gives you something,
Yeah,
which is better than
yeah,
nothing. Okay. Well, that explains that because they just kept talking about like the circumstances of your birth. They kept saying that the circumstances of your birth. I'm
yeah.
like, stop telling me that. Just tell me the goddamn circumstances of my birth. Holy shit!
Exactly.
I was so mad. I was
Um,
getting so frustrated. I'm like, you're setting all this up, and now then knowing that it is a little anticlimactic.
yeah, I think it was just like that district in particular was highly contaminated, so maybe that had something to do with it. But as far as I'm aware, I think he just saved the kids that day. I don't think they were born. Like I don't think he saved a pregnant woman and then they were born. I don't know. I'm very confused.
Yeah, it. I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
fucking know.
I don't know.
Um,
I could be
yes,
completely wrong, but that's just my memory of what I read in those files.
that was my last like thing that I was like really um that I was really hung up on. Are there any final thoughts on the story and plot that you want to touch on before we go into final thoughts?
Yeah, had a idea of how to fix some of the story issues,
Oh,
particularly when you
okay.
mentioned um, Jin and Alicia and stuff. And
Hmm.
I couldn't help but thinking, I, I couldn't help but think while you were talking that this game would have really benefited by having character sub story missions. Like, for example, uh,
They
what's
have
that game?
one. They have one, and you like he's not even like one of the main members of your
Oh,
crew.
yeah, that guy that's trying to track down the criminals and you just keep running into him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's actually like some genuine like character development in that section, but you don't fucking know this dude. He's not any of the part of the main characters. He like you see him around the Neuron like offices, but that's about it. Like you don't
Yeah.
really have any other connection to him other than that.
Yeah, so they had to do they should have done something similar to that, but have it like in the police headquarters, you start off a quest line with Alicia, for example, and she's got some side story going on where she has beef with X, Y, and Z, blah, 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 blah. And then they should have had it where each detective section that you're in, you meet up with Alicia, you continue her plot point, you have some sort of resolution at the end, and you get to learn a lot more about her. So
Yeah.
I would have preferred those kind of character sub stories inserted into the detective sections rather than the really annoying mini games about like carrying boxes and balancing ice cream and stuff. So I think that's a missed opportunity because they really could have expanded on these side characters because they're there. Use them, have them give some sort of, personality and humanity to the storyline and actually find out who they are, where they come from, what motivates them, yada, yada, yada. So, insert those in. And I think it would have been a lot more satisfying, at least with
Uh,
what happens to those characters.
yeah, no, I agree entirely. And side note, that character that they do that for is Billy Williams, and he looks like a complete asshole. He's always wearing sunglasses, even at night. Um, and inside, I don't understand that.
What a
There's a
rebel.
couple of what? Sorry.
What a rebel.
What? um, but no, I'm with you. Like, there's a couple. Like, there's some really minor stories. Like, there's a side story with the three kind of like main women characters of Olive, Brenda, and a little bit of Marie as well. Where there's like people who are like infatuated with them, and you have to try to help them like woo Olive or Brenda or
Mm.
Marie, but it never really is effective. It's a weird, like, it's a dumb side mission because it's the only character arc. It's not. It has nothing to do with the character of the women. It has everything to do with the creepers who just want to hit on them, and that doesn't give any character development for these characters. So, like I think Marie is a really fun character. The person who's Lappy. She's really bubbly and goofy, though. I am going to say this now. They put a bizarre amount of jiggle physics on her boobs in this game.
Oh, did they? I
Marie,
didn't notice.
there's some jiggle physics with her, and I don't. I don't really know why, because it felt out of place. Like if she was some character that was meant to be sexy, then I could understand it more. But otherwise, it just kind of felt out of place. I don't know. It was weird. Um,
Yeah. Or if they had some sort of subplot about you, the player character, potentially romancing one of these 3 women and then having a
yeah.
romance sub-story, then maybe, yeah, because if she's supposed to be one of your romance options, I could see that happening. But no, I'm a gentleman. I was looking at her eyes.
A gentleman always looks at the eyes.
Yeah.
No, it. But I agree with you, man. I really wish that, because all the characters are interesting. Olive has this really like she's she's a leader. Olive is a leader, and I like that. I
Mm,
like that she has that characteristic, and it would have been really cool to learn more about how she kind of came to be who she is. Brenda is kind of like the she's the medic, but also I would say she's kind of almost like a therapist for a lot of people. She's good at listening, from what I remember.
mm,
And like how, like why is he a recluse? Like why can you never see him in person? Like I understand he's a quote unquote like tech geek and a hacker, but like that that's just a stereotype, that you're not, that's not a character. That's just a stereotype that you're giving him. Like, oh well, tech geeks don't like they stay in their homes. They don't come out of their house. So he just flies around with this thing. Like
yeah. I
if
had,
you're gonna develop characters that I don't give that aren't even main characters, why don't you spend the time on your characters, on your actual main characters, not just minor ones?
yeah, exactly. I had a theory about how, which obviously never got paid off, but my theory was, wouldn't it be cool if he wasn't actually a person and he was just an AI? And that's the reason why you never see him in
Yeah,
person?
we keep referencing Ghost in the Shell. Maybe he's the ghost in the
Yeah,
shell.
maybe. But
That
yeah,
would be kind of cool.
that's sort of what I mean about the story having a lot of missed opportunities, because I thought it was good, but there's just so much potential there to really elevate it to another level,
Hmm.
and all the things that they could have done in order to do that, they just didn't do it. And I wish they hadn't spent so long on padding out all these detective sections with really meaningless side stuff like healing people that have the corruption and, whatever, and then actually like put it into something that was a bit more story focused. That would have been such a great, like, that just would have been the icing on the cake, the cherry on top to make this game more than the sum of its parts. And that would
Hmm.
have been fucking great.
I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that.
Mm.
Any last words on the story before we wrap up, though?
Um,
Or I should say, any
yeah,
other last words?
yeah.
Anything else you'd like to go into?
I think the sort of twist at the end of about what happens to your sibling was
Unnecessary?
good, but
Good?
yeah.
Okay.
Well, I
You know
mean,
what? Yeah, okay, that's fair. I could see it
here's
both ways. Sorry, I'll let you continue. I'm gonna
no,
let you finish.
hold up, Imma let you finish in a minute. Um, I like the idea of it. So basically those listening, well, it's a spoiler section anyway, but you kill your sibling, or you are supposed to. I don't know what happens if you don't select to do it, so
Oh,
I have no idea.
they still die. I chose not to
Oh.
select it.
Oh, okay. Disappointing. But yeah, once they've died, you reload your file, and then it's basically like an epilogue of, is it an epilogue or a prologue? I can't remember. Um,
Epilogue. Prologue would be before the game. Epilogue would be
okay.
post.
So it's an epilogue basically explaining what's happened since the final fight. And your sibling is now alive, but it's not them. It's basically one of the clones of them is left over. And I believe Brenda was
Oh.
somehow able to put in the memories of your sibling because they had a recording from when they were in the hospital. So essentially, you've got a clone walking around that is your sibling with the same memories of your sibling, but they have no recollection of what happened to them after the point that they were originally in the hospital. And it's like they were never gone. And I really like that idea, but it just, I didn't play the post game enough to see if they paid off anything about it, but I thought it would have been really cool to expand on that and have this sort of relationship, or see what the relationship is between the siblings now that there's basically this imposter there and how that sort of fits into everything. But the downside to that is your main character being a mute and a silent protagonist, they don't really
Yeah.
have their own characterization, so you can't really see any dynamic there. It's just the player insert, and, with that, you're hindered from being able to see your main character have any personality develop and how they react to other characters around them. So that's, you know, slight
Yeah.
disappointment. I wish they would have had both characters voiced.
I agree. Yeah, because there's so many moments in the game where there's these really heavy emotional moments, like when your dad
Yes.
dies or quote or disappears, and you get a blank fucking stare from your character, and I'm like,
Yeah.
come on, man. Like, listen, I understand silent protagonists are meant to be like the analog for the player to put themselves into the game world and feel like they're a part of it, but it takes you out like it really takes you out of it when your character's not reacting at all. Like when it's in like if it's first person, you can get away
Mm.
with that a lot more because you can't see the body language and you just kind of react. Like it feels a lot more immersive that way. But when it's third person and you can see your character having no emotional reaction whatsoever, and you can't even have dialogue to like go with it, like it really would not have hurt to have your character have like a dialogue. I don't think a silent protagonist in this is entirely necessary. I think I think it could have been like I think the story lends itself that it would have worked with a silent protagonist, but the implementation and execution of it doesn't work when you have so many emotionally heavy moments and just stone faced from your character.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think it's even more of a missed opportunity because you have the two siblings. Whichever sibling that you don't pick is already voiced. So it's like you have voice acting for either choice already. Why didn't you just use the voice acting for both of them, regardless of which one you picked?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's frustrating. I really like there's a lot what I think is frustrating about the story in this game because while I think we're both in agreement, we kind of like it overall for the most part. There's
Mm,
just a lot of stuff that they kind of like leave by the wayside that they could have either pulled on that storyline or they pulled on that string and like see where it went or like set it up for a sequel. And I don't know if there ever will be a sequel to this. Like there's enough here, like the world is rich enough that you could totally continue on with the story of this game world, because what happens after you beat it is that after Yosef gets defeated, the chimeras start to disappear, and you still have yours and you can clean up what's remaining, but there is hope that humanity can eventually leave the ark and repopulate the world again. And how cool
yeah.
would it be to have the sequel to be you on the task force being the first points of contact back into the world and seeing what the world would look like being
Oh,
completely overtaken by chimera. You know what I mean? Like
that'd be
what happened to
cool.
the land? Like, there have been so many that's a great idea for a sequel. And I there's
Yeah.
enough world building in this game where they really set you up for that you could do more. And right now it's just a standalone game. I don't know if Platinum's ever going to make another one. I don't know if Nintendo's interested in it. I don't know how well it's sold. I'd actually be
Mm.
really curious about that. What are the sales? I'll
Can you
look
look
that
it up
up
real
real
quick?
quick. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll look it up real quick. I'll look it up real quick because that could be the determining factor. Excuse me. Um,
I
from
think
what I can,
from
1.3
sorry.
million copies worldwide as of December
Oh,
2022.
I mean, it's not bad. It's not great, but it's not bad either.
It's one of the few platinum games that have sold over 1 million copies, though. Apparently,
Yeah, so it's successful for a Platinum game for sure. Um, Platinum's this weird developer that, you know, have a lot of things that are looked on as being very high quality and people like them and, appreciate them, but they never seem to get the sales numbers that I think they deserve. So, yeah, I don't know. It's odd.
well, Bayonetta 3 sold over 1 million units, just over 1 million. So it's Bayonetta, like one of their most popular series that Nintendo has brought back.
Yes.
It sold either it sold on a comparable scale, maybe more, maybe less. I don't know because this was like the sales numbers for Astral Chain was as of December 2022, and the sales numbers that I see from Bayonetta are as February 2023. So there could be, I'm sure it's a negligible amount more, at least for Astral Chain.
Yeah.
Bayonetta, I wouldn't be surprised. Bayonetta 3, I wouldn't be surprised if it's a little bit more of, especially considering that was a little over 1 million units in February 2023 when the game came out in October 2022. So,
Mm.
uh, Astral Chain came out in mid 2019, and by 2022 it sold like over 1 million units. So I don't know what the final numbers would be, but either way, like that's a good amount of sales, and I
Yeah.
feel like it would have been. I feel like there's enough meat on the bone here. There's enough stuff happening in this game that I think you could expound upon. And as much as both you and I have issues with some of the elements of the story and how like much they chose to go into detail or not go into detail, I did really like this story, and I think there's enough here to expound upon in a sequel.
Yeah, I did too. Could you imagine if they put Akira Howard into Smash Brothers? Then Astral Chain would start selling more.
Absolutely,
Green
man.
light a
Holy shit.
sequel. Yeah. Yeah, cool. I think I'm pretty much ready to wrap it up.
Well, let's go into our final thoughts on the game. And as the guest, I'll give you the final word. You know, once again, stealing
Okay.
something from our friends over at Retro Hangover, but from a little bit of their format. But no, final thoughts on the game, right? Like, what did we think overall? I think it's pretty apparent we both like this game quite a bit. Um, I think this is a really solid action game with pretty deep combat, a really fun and engaging story, beautiful visuals, and honestly, a really solid soundtrack overall. Like, I think it has some pacing issues, which we both were in agreement with the detective sections. I think overall this game has a lot going for it, and it's one of those ones where, as much as it was like super popular in terms of like the online conversations when it came out, I don't really see people talking about it now, and it's kind of a bummer. I think this is like one of those games where it was popular when it came out, and then it's now become a little bit, maybe become a little bit of a hidden gem, sort of, or like an
Yeah.
underrated gem, I should say. I think this game is great. I really was happy with my time with this, and I'm really grateful that my patrons voted for it because I finally got to play it, and I really enjoyed pretty much everything about it. Yes, there's flaws with it that we talked about, but I really like this game. I I don't know. I feel like I'm missing. There's like emotions that I'm feeling about this that I haven't quite articulated, but it's all good emotions. Like, it's emotions that I wish I could accurately articulate just how much fun I had with this game. It was a really great experience. Adam, over to you. Final thoughts on this game. What are you feeling on
Okay, so basically everything you said, I think the same.
it?
um, although uh, I do have to admit, as much as I liked it, there is this twang of or tinge of disappointment because it didn't really um, reach the heights that I was hoping it would. And by that, I mean, I could easily have seen myself maybe 5 years ago really having a strong emotional connection to this game and loving the crap out of it. But something about me today in my current state, I think I find it a little more, not necessarily forgettable, but I don't think it will stick with me as much as a previous platinum game would have, like a Nier Automata. But that's not fair because Nier Automata is like basically a masterpiece. Maybe a Bayonetta, like a game like that sticks with me for years to come. And I don't think that Astral Chain quite reached those heights. And I don't think it's because I had really high expectations. It's just that everything on the surface, all of the aesthetics, the music, the setting, the plot, the setup, all that stuff is exactly in my pocket of things that I really, really like. And as my partner said while I was playing this, and he was watching, he's like, "This is very you coded," and I'm like, "Yeah, it is. It's very me coded." But it just didn't quite reach the peak of what I think its potential was, and that's a bummer. But having said that, I would absolutely play a sequel if they made one. And I love the idea actually of them trying to reclaim the contaminated earth. It could be like a colonization thing, and then you're out and you're trying to protect the new colonies on Earth from the current chimera threat that's already there, and maybe there's other sort of monstrosities that have developed and evolved in this wasteland of corruption. Like it's just such a great idea. Um, but yeah, I mean, I liked it. Very happy with it. Wish it, you know, was a little better, but that's just a me problem. I do encourage everybody else to go out and try it because I think it is a very good game, especially if you're into action games and platinum games. And oh, one thing that I've been meaning to address, but I completely forgotten to do so until this point, is that this game is not an RPG. So can people stop saying that it is because it's fucking annoying.
No, it's not an RPG. It has
Yeah.
RPG elements because there's skill trees, but it's not like you level up per se. I mean,
Oh,
it,
it's
it's like, so I love Horizon Zero Dawn, right?
yeah,
Horizon Zero Dawn's not an RPG. It has RPG
agreed.
elements. You have a level that you level up in, but I wouldn't say it's like an RPG. There's not like stat points that you put yourself into. You know what I mean? Like
Thank you.
there, yeah. No, it's
Yeah,
there's very basic stat points, attack, defense, but there's not vitality and dexterity and all this other shit. No, I'm with you. It's not an RPG. It's an action
yeah.
game that has some light RPG elements.
Absolutely. It's just an action game that has a character progression system. That's it. It's a skill tree. There are skill trees in so many other games that are not RPGs. This is not an RPG. And the reason why I brought that up is because I see it recommended in the JRPG subreddit all the time. And I'm like, it is not an RPG. What is wrong with you people?
That's
But that's
so
just me
bizarre.
being pedantic.
Well, and actually, you've been speaking of things that I forgot to bring up till just now. I actually did a little bit of research on the development. Not a lot. I didn't have enough as much time as I would have liked to. I found a handful of interviews that I just didn't have a chance to read through. So here's some fun facts that I should have sprinkled in throughout the episode and fucking forgot. So here you go, listeners. At the end of the episode, over 2 hours in, here's a little bit of some fun facts. The game first went into development before Nier Automata, and when Nintendo
Wow.
asked Platinum to make a highly challenging game for them, and it was in development for about 5 years, and it was originally going to be a medieval game before transitioning into a sci-fi world. They were also going to have the main characters be triplets instead of twins. I think both of those
Oh,
decisions to change were smart. um, I
yeah.
think triplets would have been odd. They had ideas of a lot of different monster types that you could catch, and Nintendo pushed back and asked them to focus on the action. And this is where the idea of the 5 Legion types came to be. So they wanted, it kind of sounded to me like a little bit of Pokemon esque, like there's monster types that you could catch. Like that seems a little too Pokemon ish. So I
Yeah.
think Nintendo pushing back was smart. And by them focusing on only 5 Legion types, it made the combat pretty deep, at least in my
I
opinion.
think originally it was supposed to be 10 Legion. So you can definitely sort of tell when you play Astral Chain now that they have combined a bunch of different abilities into a single Legion. Like, for example, the sword one being able to eavesdrop, but also being able to cut through energy beams and stuff. It sounds like something that maybe a different Legion would have been designed for eavesdropping, like a scouting Legion or something like that. So,
Hmm.
I appreciate that they cut it down to 5 because I already thought that 5 was maybe a touch too many, but you know, it works in the game, but I can't imagine playing with 10. That would be crazy.
No, I think 5 is a good number entirely.
Mm.
The director of the game, Takahisa, previously directed Nier Automata, but this was his first game direct. This was his first time directing a game that was the start of its own franchise. Like, Nier Automata is based out off the Nier series, so he had some foundation to build off of.
Yeah,
So this was his first time directing a game in its own franchise, and the producer of the game, of course, is Hideki Kamiya, the legendary dude from Platinum Games.
I love
Um,
him.
Now, this is a little bit of a humble brag. Platinum Games, like the company's Instagram page, for some fucking reason follows me on Instagram.
What?
I don't
Ah,
understand why. I genuinely am baffled by it. but I'm not complaining. I think it's kind of nuts. Yeah, if you
Maybe
look up Platinum Games underscore official, they are only following 20 people, and it's me, Hideki Kamiya, Babylon's Fall, Amazon Luna, and then a whole bunch. Like they're following Cisco, like the
oh, from like Ebert and Cisco? No, wait, that's not right.
like the musician
Oh.
Cisco, like Sisqo.
Oh, that
Um,
Cisco died. That Cisco guy from Ebert and whatever died a long time ago. I'm pretty sure.
and also Nintendo of America, Sega official, Sega, stuff like that. Yoko Taro. But then like they're following me. There's a random cosplayer named Black Ashfall Cosplay that they're following. No idea why. It's like it's yeah. I
You
don't
should
get
ask
it.
them. You should ask them to do a partner post on Instagram when you post this.
Oh my god, I'd be terrified to have no thank you.
Oh no,
I
don't
don't
do it. Also, I'm going to assume that the reason why they're following you is because some people in their office listen to your podcast. In which case, please take our constructive criticisms to heart when making Astral Chain 2 because I want to play it.
right. I would love to see an Astral Chain 2. I really enjoyed this game. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, that'll do it, y'all. That's the last little bits for this episode. Thank you all so much for listening. Adam, thank you for joining me. This was a really fun conversation. I feel a little bad in the spoiler alert section. I feel like I was a little disjointed, so thank you for help keeping me on track as best you could.
You're
This was a great
fine.
time. So thank you for joining me.
It's been a pleasure. I had an absolute blast. Thank you so much for having me and popping my still loading cherry.
There you go. That should have happened sooner. Should have happened sooner. But
Yes.
uh, for those who want to pop the good, the bad, and the backlog cherry, where
Oh,
can
yeah.
the good people find you online, and what would you like to promote?
Okay. Well, if my podcast is still active and alive by the time you listen to this, which it should be, I've got a backlog of episodes ready to go. You can find me on my link tree, which is linktr.ee/goodbadbacklog, where a backlogging podcast. The whole idea was done during COVID to basically work through all of the games that we had already bought because my co-host Kieran and I sort of saw ourselves as fledgling collectors, I suppose. And yeah, I've got a massive. Well, it's not that big. It's a humble collection of video games that have been sitting on my shelf for many years, which I have not played. And so the idea was that we would just go through and play a bunch of games that we otherwise wouldn't have, and talk shit and banter about it. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun. And if you like some rude, crude humor occasionally, and me being an obnoxious guy with a little brother syndrome, even though he's in his mid-30s, then we've got the podcast for you.
Go check it out, everybody. And of course, as for myself, you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, Twitch, all that good stuff at Still Loading Pod at all those locations. At Still Loading Podcast, though, on YouTube. If you want to support the show, please consider giving it a 5-star rating or review on Apple Podcasts or whichever podcasting app you use. It helps more people find the show, and it makes me feel warm and fuzzy, and I like feeling warm and fuzzy. You can also support the show with a little bit of money by going over to patreon.com/stillloadingpod. For as little as $1 a month, you'll get all the episodes earlier with better audio quality, as well as patron voting rights, which is what brought us this topic today. You can help guide the direction of the show and pick future game topics, which the time we're recording this, I actually have to post another poll for the next quarter's Patreon poll, and I still don't know really what to post for that. So I gotta get on that. But yeah, that's all at the $1 level. At $3 for $3 a month, you get everything prior plus patron shout outs at the beginning of each episode, which you heard at the beginning of this one. For $4 a month, you get everything prior plus 2 mini bonus episodes, and for $5 a month, of course, you get all the previous tiers plus access to my monthly movie podcast, which I guess when this comes out, it will still be Still Bonding, my monthly James Bond podcast where me and a bunch of friends bond over 007. And after that, it's going to be the Fast and Furious franchise. So if you wanted to hear me talk movies, that is over on Patreon at the $5 level. So all that, patreon.com/stillloadingpod. But that's it. And that's all the time I got for you today on Still Loading. Thank you all so very much for listening. Adam, thank you once again for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
And with all that said, listeners, I will see you all next time.
Goodbye.